Artlist.io.
All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of My True Crime Obsession. I am your host, Christine Dana, and I am joined today via satellite by Raul Montero of Catch Lisk. So, welcome, Raul. All right. I think he's with us. He can, yes, okay. And yes, there's a lot to discuss today with regards to recent developments in the Rex Human Gilgo Beach Lisk case. And I'm hoping to discuss and share as much information with you and try to get as much in the next hour or so. So there's been a lot going on, a lot of updates, including Rex Human's recent court appearances, both today in Riverhead County Court. He was in court for just a regular court appearance, but he was also brought into court on January 16th, 2024. We're going to talk about the details of that court appearance and the repercussions that holds. We also, Raul and I were able to attend a symposium by John Ray that was held at St. John's University on last Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. And John Ray shared a lot of interesting information with us. There were some witnesses that had given John Ray some affidavits, and we'd like to share that info with you. So with that said, welcome to the show, Raul.
And thank you. I appreciate it. You know, you're a kindred spirit and a fast friend, and for the last few years, and I appreciate your support of me. So I am absolutely, totally supportive of you and all your endeavors.
Well, thank you so much. And I know how dedicated you are to not only this case, but the victims. And, you know, it's so important to always put the victims first. So with that said, talking about Rex Human, he was brought into court on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, Criminal County Court in Riverhead, and he was charged by the grand jury of murder in the second degree, which is a felony, for the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, which took place on or about July 9th, 2007. And for anyone that's been following this case, this shouldn't be a shock or surprise to anyone. This was basically coming down the pike. Maureen Brainerd Barnes is one of the Gilgo Beach Four, along with Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello. He was charged for those murders, given indictments for those murders back on when he was arrested on July 13th and brought into court on July 14th, 2023. But they hadn't yet, I believe, processed the DNA for Maureen Brainerd Barnes, and they were still doing testing on that DNA to tie it into, tie her death to Rex. And I understand that the DNA was finalized, and they were able to connect her death to Rex. So, and let's just take a look at Maureen Brainerd Barnes. For those of you that are unfamiliar, she was 25 years old at the time of her death. She lived at 180 Prospect Street in Norwich, Connecticut, during the summer of 2007. Around July 6, 2007, she took an Amtrak train from New London, Connecticut to Grand Central Terminal. She was a sex worker. She often stayed in Manhattan and did work out of hotel rooms in Manhattan. And during that time, she was staying at the Super 8 Motel, located at 59 West 46th Street. She was very small, demure, 4 feet, 11 inches tall, as were many of the victims of the Gilgo Beach Four. She did advertise on Craigslist, Backpage, and many other websites, promoting herself as a sex worker. She was last heard from on July 9th, 2007, and it was at 11:43 p.m. that she had spoken with a friend of hers on the phone. And on that Monday, July 9th, 2007, she took an out call, meaning that she wasn't meeting the John in her hotel room, but she was actually going out of her hotel room and meeting that person at a particular location. And that's the last that she was heard from. She was reported missing by her friend the following Saturday, July 14th, 2007. And it was about 3 years later, 3.5 years later, that she was found on the north side of Ocean Parkway on December 13th, 2010. And she is believed to be one of the first victims of the Gilgo Beach Four. And she was found with other victims on that day, on December 13th, 2010. Did you want to cut in here at any point and say anything at all, Raul, regarding Maureen?
Yeah, I you can start off making me upset. Oh, teary up.
Yeah.
Maureen is the first of the what's known colloquially as the Gilgo Beach Four. She was the first to be to go missing, and she was the true definition of survival worker. And it's a small initiative of mine to change our narrative, our definitions of, or our descriptors. And Maureen worked hard. She had a family. She had obligations, and she found that survival work was an effective way to offset the struggle that she was experiencing. And when I think of any of the victims, I think and their occupations, I think of Maureen first, and the survival work that she needed. She stayed an extra day in the city in order to offset the need for she was facing eviction. I'm very sensitive talking about any of the victims exactly, because it's and I evolve continuously, and I want to speak about all of these beautiful people because I know the facts, and I can reference and source the facts, and I can speak with an honesty and an empathy, without judgment. But to speak on their behalf is something, even with a blessing, I'm hesitant to do, because there's so much more to me than, a name or a status or a number in an alignment of victims. They're beautiful people. So Maureen was, in my opinion, the definition of what a survival worker does. She did it to offset eviction. She did it to keep her family together. She did it to maintain her independence, and to get away from stigmas. And her struggle to do that resonates in many ways with a lot of the things that I do to advocate for people. I respect Maureen so much. I respect her family immensely, and the indictment, the arraignment rather, for him in the death of Maureen was emblematic of decade-long struggle or research or advocacy or whatever, punching a wall in frustration, to see some sort of forward movement in justice for her case and for all of the others. And it was an incredibly poignant day. It was a heavy day. It was a joyous day at the same time. And I'm so glad that we were able to secure an indictment against him, and her family deserves it.
Oh, I totally agree.
As do all the others, but
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
And, this is why I had the highest respect for you, because, there are a lot of people who are into this case, and I'm not sure necessarily what their motive is, or if it's the right motive. People are into true crime, whatever the case may be. But, you genuinely care about the victims and their families, and you've made a connection with the victims and their families. And that's so important. And it's important for people, for the public to hear that. People so quickly dismiss these women as sex workers, and it's so much more important to realize that they were people who were struggling to make a life for themselves. I just want to just say, I had read an article about the January 16th hearing. And after the hearing, they had spoken to some of the victims' families. They spoke to Nicolette Brainerd Barnes, who was 7 years old at the time of her mother's murder. Obviously, Maureen was her mother. And just quotes from the article say that her loss drastically changed the trajectory of my life. There were countless times that I needed her, that she was not there. She said, I remember that she read to me every night. And now I can no longer remember the sound of her voice. And things like that just break my heart. And, when that came down, when the indictment came down on Tuesday, January 16th, I was just so happy for Maureen's family that finally they had some answers. They definitely have, some sense of hope and justice. I don't know that it can provide closure for them because Maureen is gone and unfortunately, she's deceased now, and she will never be back in their lives again. Spiritually, she's there and surrounding them, but he snuffed the life, and nothing can bring her back. But hopefully, justice will be served in this case. And if it is proven that Rex Heuermann is responsible for her death, which I do think, in reading the indictment and the bail application here. There's just so much evidence mounted against him that, I hope that he, receives punishment for what he's done to Maureen and the other victims.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as I continue to evolve in my own advocacy, I embrace perspectives that I can't personally relate to. I never lost a family member to a violent crime. I did lose my brother suddenly. But that in and of itself, to be able to empathize at the level that I do is an honor in a way. It carries a weight with it. But because of that, I'm able to genuinely care about these people. I don't see a story. I don't see a headline. I don't see a dramatization of something that you catch on some Lifetime show that's poorly produced or whatever. I see a beautiful person struggling to survive and keep hold of their family. I see people that are groomed and manipulated by very, very evil people in the world. I see situations where what turns out to be a victim, they realize they have no other way out, or they're given to believe that they have no way out. And this is where they feel the only path forward is. And it's not the case, and we can do better as a society. And if I can make even the slightest difference, then I'm going to work tirelessly for that. Having the ability to communicate or reach out or even interact with any family member is an honor, first and foremost. It's an honor, and it carries a lot of weight for me personally. And I respect first and foremost the ability to even interact. I respect the respect given to me, because I've said it a billion times in a million places. I'm a nobody, but I care. And I think for me to go more public facing in all of this was because the truth needs to be told. False narratives need to be erased and corrected, and the reality, the truths need to be said, need to be screamed, need to be posted, need to be blasted, about things like that, about manipulation, about narratives, and about people that have really not a genuine path forward, or really looking out for not only the family members, which are beautiful to me, the victims, which are beautiful to me, but probably even more important than all of that, if that can be said, is the legacy their legacies. Their legacies mean so much more than everything. I am whatever I do, and whatever silly praise that I get for the work that I do is minuscule,
Mm-hmm.
but the legacy, like the map that I do, is meant for forever. It's meant
Yes.
for someone else to take to the next level. Um, and that's what's more important to me. It's not what I do. It's whatever I'm able to accomplish for someone else to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you look at Nikki's statement about her mom, and you look at, for me, I juxtapose it with, Maureen's sister sharing with me the Make a New Reality poem, and it's
Yeah, that was
so
beautiful.
relevant. It's relevant all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just because in that snapshot when she wrote that, she felt that, and she communicated that, and she put it out there for posterity. It transcends all of that, and that's where we need to change this dynamic, or this paradigm. Like, they are not sex workers, they're not escorts, they're not even survival workers. They're human beings
Mm-hmm.
that had to do things to survive. But it doesn't take away from their talents, their God-given talents, that they're the beauty that emanates from their souls. Maureen's poem I read it at least 3 times a week. It keeps me grounded in everything that I do. And I've been in retail. I'm a professional, whatever, leader for 25, 30 years, when I had hair. But at the end, but that core grounding for me, like, really changed my entire life.
Yes. Yes.
And it's so important. So to see that this guy got arraigned and indicted on her, for her death, was a long awaited culmination of so many years of angst,
Yes.
and I'm pleased. I'm
Yes.
not, I don't equivocate between the first and second degree murder. You want to make sure you charge somebody with a crime that you can convict on. So I don't equivocate on, first or second degree murder. New York State is weird when it comes to first degree murder anyway. So second degree murder in this case is basically the same thing as first degree. So I'm
Yeah, I understand it was a question of timing that,
yeah.
when Ray Tierney had given his press conference, that he said, this is the reason why it's second degree, because of timing, because of when her death occurred. It occurred a couple of years before the other deaths had occurred, correct?
Yep.
Yes. So because of the timeline and because of logistics and legalities in the state of New York, it had to be classified as a second degree murder. But you're right. There really is no distinction with regards to this case, whether it be first degree murder or second degree murder. I'd like to kind of get into some of the details
Yeah,
about how
absolutely.
she, how this indictment came to be, and some of the things that were in the indictment. I mean, I have it right here. It's like a 25, 26-page document, and I have to go back and keep reading it and rereading it because there's so many details in here. I think one of the most incriminating pieces of evidence were the belts, and we can talk about that. So my understanding is that, I have here a picture where it actually, in the indictment, it breaks it down into a table for all the victims and the hairs that were found, and whose hairs were found on which victims. So just going through this with Maureen Brainerd Barnes, so they recovered some female hairs on her. I'm trying to be sensitive here, but when her remains were found, they did find some hairs, and it was on a belt buckle. She was restrained, I believe, with several belts, and one of the hairs was found on the belt buckle, and it belonged to Asa Ellerup. Now, I know there are going to be people out there, who are going to talk about, well, Asa, lived in the house with Rex and this and that. We can get into that. But let me just go through the others. We have Megan, and there was a hair found outside her head area that also belonged to Asa Ellerup. Then we have Megan Waterman. And there was tape in the area of her head, and there were two hairs found on that tape, and both belonging to Asa Ellerup. And then there was a male hair found on Megan Waterman that belonged to that of Rex Human. And then Amber Costello, this was very interesting. There was hair found belonging to not only Asa, but also daughter Victoria Huerman. So it's interesting. I'm curious to know. I'm thinking that, the belts may have been belts that came from Asa, possibly, came from the house. But, you talk about narratives. There's so many questions now coming up as to what is Asa's culpability in all of this. And obviously, there was a timeline given that she was away at the time that Rex Huerman had met up with Maureen and killed Maureen. That they were away in Atlantic City, and they had found in one of the storage facilities that Rex had kept a bank statement. And that they were in Atlantic City and all that. So obviously that was discussed at not only the arraignment at the hearing, but also at when John Ray gave his symposium, and he went through that piece by piece. But I want to touch upon Asa for a minute. I do question her culpability in all of this. Not so much the murders, but she had to have some knowledge that this was going on, obviously, of her husband's behavior. No doubt that, your husband is engaging in, they were both swingers at the time. And we can talk a little bit about that with regards to one of the affidavits that was given by a possible witness. But, she had engaged in behavior with him, with her husband, swinging behavior, and knew that her husband, probably went outside the marriage for sex. And then, you see these belts on TV a couple of years ago in 2020. How do you not recognize these belts? And now for the public that is unaware, she has tapped on. She's hooked up with Peacock for a documentary. And Peacock Channel is actually doing a multi-million-dollar documentary with her. She's making millions of dollars. They're following her around. When she goes into court, they are there. So that's a little infuriating in my opinion, because I feel Asa's not, I don't know if there's a right way to act, but when you find out that your husband is one of the most prolific serial killers on Long Island and is, now been named in one of the biggest cases, ongoing cases. But, I don't really see a lot of mournfulness from her. In fact, she's been quite the opposite. For me personally, I would want to go into seclusion, and she has not done that. And now she's making money on top of it for her husband's crimes. So I have to, question not only her knowledge and her culpability, but, how remorseful is she? Because, we've got lots of victims out there and they're suffering and their families are suffering and haven't made a penny off of this. So I don't know if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a loaded.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
It's a loaded universe. I learned a lot from a friend of mine, Kerry Rawson. I learned how to even have an awareness of empathy for what a family member of an accused or convicted serial killer might be experiencing. Never thought of that before.
Let me just interrupt you. For those that don't know, Kerry Rawson's father was Dennis Rader, BTK. And I have met Kerry several times, actually. So, yeah, you bring up a great example. But thank you. Continue. I'm sorry.
I don't like to use Kerry in any way, because I adore her and I respect her. But she helped me to evolve my awareness. And I instantly embraced Asa and the kids. They're not kids. They're adult children, whatever. As victims, unknowing, unwitting victims of what their father, husband had done or is accused of doing. And that empathy instantly, for me, at one point I was running one Facebook group. I was a mod of another Facebook group. I had my own Twitter brand, whatever, if you want to call it that. And I supported the fact that she's a victim. And the one thing that I learned from Kerry is she's not, this was literally said to me, she's not obligated to do or say anything. And that's true. She's not. She doesn't have to say anything. She doesn't have to do anything. It's in her best interest to not say anything, to not do anything. But that's what you have a lawyer for. Like, your lawyer is your PR guy, and your lawyer can say, my client is shell-shocked by this accusation, their universe has exploded, blah, 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 all these things that a lawyer could say, but they also could say, but we also want to acknowledge and nod some commiseration to the victims. Like, you're embedded in this now. So now you have to give some sort of, you ought to give. The optics require you to give some sort of acknowledgement to the victims. You can still say that you're not related to this case, that you're not a part of it, that you're shocked that your husband is accused of these crimes, but our hearts go out to the victim. That's it. Simple. And the measure, the level of empathy for Asa would have been consistent with every image of her that's put out there. We would have felt empathy. We would have felt sadness or confusion. We would have felt something. What I don't feel anymore is any of that, because I don't mind you going to the court. I can get that. Mm-hmm. You sign the deal, and we'll talk about the deal in a moment. Mm-hmm. They're going to want you. They're going to push you. They're going to encourage you to go and participate and be active. I think for me, the final straw when it came to any empathy towards Asa was a few weeks ago, going to the bank wearing your wedding band. You're already filing for divorce. Every publication in the planet is saying estranged wife.
Yes.
You're wearing the wedding band. I don't understand that. That to me is a conundrum. It's a conflict. And I get it. You file for divorce immediately to protect assets. I get that. I'm not going to splice hairs on that. I can accept that, protect it. Okay, good, whatever. And that's her lawyer's job. But her lawyer's job is also to make sure that she's portrayed properly in the media, and he failed in that regard. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I personally struggle with accusing complicity with this yet. Hair transfer, you have long hair. I mean, I don't have hair, but my hair is everywhere in my house.
Oh, believe me, I get the transfer of hair. Yeah.
I go and visit my kids. Yeah, I go and visit my kids' house for the night, and I spend and hang out. I make dinner for the kids or whatever, and I stay in their apartment. And I come home with cat hair that yeah. Cat hair goes to my house. It goes to where I work. It goes to any person that I meet and I give a hug to. Now, cat hair. So there's transfer, and that's a logical, viable outlet for that. I think in this case, I'm not where you're at, and that's fine, because I learn from people that don't agree. That don't agree with me, or we see different perspectives. But hair goes everywhere. It gets everywhere, and especially when you have anything sticky like tape, or if you, I hate saying binding, but in this case, I think that these 4 women somehow, and this is me talking esoterically, reached out and have brought something to hold him accountable for what happened to them. Mm-hmm. Because there's a hair on all of them. Yeah. And that's what we needed to bring him in and hold him accountable to it. So there's something to be said to that. I'm not there yet with Asa's complicit.
Well, I don't want to imply that she's complicit, but I don't. and I hope nobody thinks that I'm saying that. I'm questioning her complicity. Actually,
We
more than
can
that,
do
I'm
it.
questioning her knowledge, because you're
Yes.
married to this man for how many years? I mean, her daughter is what, over 25 years old. So I mean, I think they've been married since mid 90s. You know, you're talking a good 25, almost 30 years. How do you know? I mean, it's
Right.
hard
You learn
because,
your spouse's proclivities, sexual preferences.
but
You
then I go
you
back to Kerry Ross and like she didn't know her,
well,
you
she was
know,
a daughter. She was a daughter.
exactly.
She
Even the
was not a
wife,
wife.
did not
Yeah.
know.
She acknowledged, what the things were in hindsight that would be
Yes,
considered, triggers now. But in the moment, that's all your life. Your life encapsulates that.
yes.
I did not have the greatest childhood, but I thought that was my childhood. You know,
But I
when
just,
I
with
look
the
back at
belt, I look at the belt that was put on TV a
Well,
few
that's
years
for me
back.
the big thing. So you see 2020 with Geraldine Hart coming
Yes.
out and showing this belt, and it's like somewhere on Long Island, there's at least two people freaking the fuck out
Yes. How do you not
because
see that belt and say, "Holy Jesus, I know whose belt that is"?
and you're validated even more because you realize that of the other victims, a lot of those belt tips were cut off.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for me, I don't want to put out there what I'm envisioning, but I because I'm so victim centric and regardless of the end result, these women were fucking fighters.
Yes.
That something must have happened that he could not figure it all out in the moment.
Yep.
And beside that hair, that WH belt got him.
Yes.
So I mean, I don't question his culpability at all. I see transition from the guy we saw on that YouTube channel, that little fat cherub, and I'm not fat shaming,
Yeah.
that little, that cherub guy trying to be, coy and cute and cherubic. And I compare that with the mugshot, and I see the difference between Rex and Lisk, and he's Lisk.
Yeah, and talking about that mugshot, one of the presentations that I had attended with John Ray, that they say always look at the eyes in the mugshot. But one of the things that John Ray had pointed out, I thought was excellent, was look at his face, his mouth,
Whole
because
face.
the
I
corner of
see
his
his
mouth,
mouth.
he was smiling when he in that mugshot. If you look at that mugshot, he had a sense of pride. This is
Well,
my
I mean,
work.
I've said for the last few months, 6, 7 months, whatever, that when that belt was released, he must have practiced that scowl
Oh yeah.
because that WH is unmistakable. He knew it, and it was just a matter of time when.
Well,
Think I
we
think he
also,
existed. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No,
No,
no, please go ahead.
he existed in an environment where inbred corruption protected him without him even knowing it,
Yeah.
without them knowing it. Like they were willing to sacrifice a serial killer on Long Island to protect their bullshit. Burke and Boda
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
and McPartland,
Yeah.
but they allowed a monster to exist on the island, and there should be some culpability for that.
Yes.
So I don't want to say his name. So
No, I
RH,
know. Yeah.
I'd rather say Lisk. But
Well,
regardless, he existed in an environment that was given to him by enablers to
I agree.
protect their own bullshit.
One of the things I want to touch upon is his internet searches. I mean, I got to talk about that because when it when the police started closing in on him, I guess in the last couple of years, because it was really, the police started connecting the dots, but he went out with that one woman to Port Jeff, and he was so interested in his own fame as a typical narcissist.
Are we talking about Nikki
Yes,
Brass?
yes,
So
but I
people,
mean,
and I'm not saying I doubt her. I'm
okay,
just saying that story has changed.
okay.
So when stories start changing, you give a little bit of a free pass because it's, it's trauma recollection, and you always want to err on the side of a victim. And I don't I don't necessarily doubt
Yeah.
her,
Well, one of the
but
things I want to touch upon, yeah, is just that the fact that he was asking, "Have you heard about Lisk?" Now, whether or not this is true, who knows? But from his internet searches, he was doing a lot of internet searches, and this was in the bail application, and I'd have to find the page, but where some of his searches were regarding how police can track down certain things, and how to get rid of internet searches and how to expunge your computer. So, he kind of, was really trying to backtrack and make sure he covered his tracks. One of the other things that I have a picture up, I can't even, I mean, his internet searches for people who don't know. I'll just say a couple of them. I mean, he's got tied up fat girl porn, hung by tits porn, ball gag porn, wooden pony porn, crying blowjob porn. I mean, some of these websites, and I have a picture here. You can read through it yourself. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting. And, like Michael Brown's like, well, if anybody, looked at my internet searches, they'd be surprised what they would find. And yes, but, this is going
I mean,
a little...
yeah. I mean, if my mother looked at my internet searches without knowing what I do, for research or advocacy, then she'd be mortified.
Yes.
My grandmother, oh my God, I'm embarrassed even saying my grandmother's name, like mentioning my grandmother in this dialogue with that.
Yeah.
But, but this is the base goal or desire of somebody who's a sexual serial predator.
Yes,
And that's
agree 100%.
what he is.
Sexual
And
sadist.
there's no denying it. The sadist actually comes in when you
Yes.
see like wooden pony and all this torture stuff. And it's
Yeah.
not an evolution of a sexually open and curious mind. It's someone that takes that and then
To a different level.
drills down into a whole other element and depth.
Yeah,
And
a lot of it centers around rape, a lot of it pedophilia as well, Asian porn, pedophilia. Yeah.
and at the end of it, it's all about control. All of those search engines,
Yes.
or the majority of it is about control or experiencing, viscerally that control.
Yes.
And that's a very, very dangerous man. There's a picture of Rex right now,
Yes.
that exploded, where he's on the Long Island Railroad and he's writing on his tablet and everything, and it's clearly him. And there's a whole lot to be said about what he's doing, but for me, that picture last night coming to me is as frightening as the mugshot, because the mugshot we see Lisk, the image of him writing on his tablet on the railroad with a beer in his hand. Who hasn't done that? I mean,
yeah, let me just add to that. So for anyone that's unaware, and I'm sure this is going to circulate around the internet, apparently there was a passenger on a Long Island Railroad who took a shot of Rex Human, and this was back in, I believe it was 2015.
right.
And so he was like fat shaming Rex Human, like, making comments about his large size. He was drinking a beer. He was on his tablet, as you said, using a stylist. And, now we're in 2023, 2024, and the person who took this picture realized, holy shit, this is Rex Human. So if you look at the tablet, you can't really see it clearly. And I'm hoping that picture makes its way to the FBI, or at least to Ray Tierney.
It's all been submitted to law enforcement.
So that they can, because the picture on the tablet is not clear, but there could be very incriminating information there that could be directly tied to the case. I mean, it was 2015. So, yeah.
I mean, and that's just speaking to this situation. The bigger picture, which you can extrapolate from, and it may not be for this forum, it could for another conversation. But all those newsstands in Penn Station back then, you had all like they sold alcohol everywhere. They had porn magazines everywhere, and
Oh,
you
good old
literally
New York City. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you work 10-hour days,
Sure.
you jump on your train that's crowded with thousands of people, you grab a tall boy beer or whatever, you grab a Hustler magazine, and then you go home and whatever. But Rex was different. I hate saying his name, but he was different. He was plotting, he was planning, he was reminiscing, he was recollecting, he was
Yeah, and
doing
that's in the bail application as well. They talk about the 7 burner phones. They talk about all the the types of computer software that he had to get rid of his internet and engine
Well,
searches.
and that's the brilliance right now that I think is coming out of the task force and Ray Tierney, is because what they're putting in these the first bail document and the superseding bail document is not only enough evidence to tie him to these murders, but they're also in a way sort of breadcrumbing what might come forward. So the Asian twink always had me peaked because we have Asian dough out there.
Absolutely.
And is something coming for that. There's black porn. Does that indicate peaches? Is Ray Tierney sending us a message that here's what we got right now, but we're still going forward with everything else? And for me, that is my greatest hope, because
Yes.
and not to diminish, Maureen, Melissa, Megan, and Amber, but there's Valerie, there's Jessica, there's Asian Doe, there's Peaches Toddler, there's Shannon that needs a whole world of support
Yes.
into a fresh set of
Karen
eyes.
Vergata. And there's
Karen
many
Vergata.
victims that we may not even be aware of yet.
I mean,
So-
I'm aware of them. They're all on my map.
yes,
but,
yes, the map. I
and
want
I don't want to hijack the whole.
No, it's fine. I mean, I want to talk. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the bail application, the January 16th court appearance, but I want to move on to the symposium. So last Tuesday at St. John's University, John Ray had a symposium to go over previous information known about the case and also new information that has come out with regards to possible witnesses, and he's taken affidavits from these witnesses. It was, I believe, a 3-hour symposium, and he dedicated the first half of the symposium to Shannon Gilbert's case, which you and I are both very fluent in and familiar with. He had Shannon's sister, Stevie, get up and speak to the audience, which was very heartfelt and very moving and very emotional. And then he got into the details of Shannon's case, and then he got into other possible victims that have come forward and have signed affidavits. But with regards to Shannon, one of the things that concerns me, and anybody who's followed this case knows Shannon's case, know how she was in Oak Beach and what happened to her. Well, we'll never truly know what happened to her, but we know most of the details of that night of May 1st, 2010. I know that John is really pushing to make a connection between Shannon and Rex Heuermann. And I don't know necessarily that there is a connection there, but more importantly, I'm wondering what kind of implications that will have on this case. Because, you have to think about the defense. They're going to jump all over this. Because maybe Rex isn't so guilty, and maybe it's somebody else in Oak Beach who's responsible for this. I personally think, and I'll put it out there, I don't think that Rex had anything to do with Shannon's death, and I could be wrong. But that would have to put Rex in Oak Beach on May 1st, 2010. So, do some research. Where was Rex at that time? Somebody knows where he was on May 1st, 2010. There are people in Oak Beach who I feel are directly related to her demise. So, and then we have to talk about the hyoid bone. I met with Dr. Michael Baden back in September. In person at CrimeCon 2023, and I got to have a one-on-one interview with him, and we specifically spoke about Shannon's hyoid bone because there's been so much controversy about that, about, did she go into the marsh and die? Or, was it something more nefarious? And her hyoid bone is broken. I mean, when Michael Baden did the autopsy, it was broken. How did it break? It's very difficult to break. Anyone who knows anything about science and the hyoid bone, you can't, that is a bone that just does not break. It is through strangulation or some kind of violent impact. So I'm going to hand it over to you and just, if you want to share any thoughts, because I know that you have a lot to say about this. So
more than we have left in time.
I know.
I'll say this about the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone holds up the tongue. It is about 2.5 centimeters wide and about a centimeter thick. In documented cases, a broken hyoid is indicative of strangulation in 50%. So it's not an overwhelming majority that a strangulation murder has a broken hyoid. It's just not. It's 50%. So it's not indicative all around. You look at the four, Maureen, Melissa, Megan, and Amber, whatever was put out there by any official source, whether intentional or surreptitiously, is asphyxiation. Asphyxiation encompasses several things. It's not necessarily strangulation. It's suffocation. It's at least half a dozen different things. A broken hyoid, 50% of strangulations have a broken hyoid. So it's not fully conclusively indicative of intent. That includes people who hang themselves. It's not always present. It happens mostly in hangings because of the force of gravity. But in Shannon's case, and I'm going to just say my opinion with her hyoid, the hole in the hyoid became a big focal point, not only in the symposium, but in his more recent YouTube show that was on there that John Ray participated in. And it's okay to think about possibilities, but the possibilities have to stay in some sort of reality. And at some point the other night, someone was saying how the hole in the hyoid was caused by an arrow. And I nearly almost threw up where I'm sitting because there's so much scientific parameters to get a hole in a hyoid, that the hole is 3/16 of an inch. That's less than my pinky nail, and I'll zoom in somewhere on that. It's nearly impossible for a moving target. Now, even if you're held stationary, it's still astronomical. But even then, you have to mitigate the force of a pull of an arrow, the bow. You have to account for distance. The strength of my arm versus someone else's arm is completely different. So all of that is relative. And it's just not, it's not a valid thing. And I hate it. For years, I hated the phrase Occam's razor, which is basically the simplest explanation is the explanation. But in this case, you have, and please forgive the graphic nature, and I posted this when I tweeted and messaged about this, so it's a trigger warning. So please, if anyone's watching that can't handle what I'm about to say about decomposition, please mute this for a few moments. Bodies decompose, and wildlife will go for sustenance. So they'll go for sinews, muscles, membranes. The hyoid is not connected to anything by any other bone. It is connected by membrane and muscle. So that's going to attract instantaneously wildlife. I'm not going to go into what kind of wildlife, but hyoid, as those membranes and muscles decompose, the hyoid's going to fall. I think the critical thing is that the bones are missing. The bones were not recovered. Now, the bones could have been carried off by a mouse. They could have been dispersed. She was out there for 19 months, allegedly. So rain, water could have taken. The bones are tiny. They're not, you're talking about a piece that's only about an inch wide anyway, a bone that's an inch wide anyway. So, you know, a lot of things can happen to that, especially when a bone is surrounded by membrane. It's going to deteriorate. It's going to be carried off. It's the same way why some of her finger bones were 50 feet away. There's bird and things, and you know they're going to take it. They're going to move away. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they leave the remnants.
Okay.
And I hate saying that because she's a person and a beautiful woman, and her family is so special. But the facts, the reality is that I don't. The intent to drill a hole is as absurd and unrealistic as an arrow. There is no drilling of a hyoid bone. It is so tiny. It's the fingernail, and you would need like a jeweler's drill in order to do so. But the question is, for fuck's sakes, why? That's not a signature. A signature of missing left feet, missing left shoes. That's a signature. You know, to drill a hyoid, it is so far above the reality of it. It is so specific. Is it possible? Yes, everything's possible. It's possible, but before I die, I'm going to learn how to fly with my arms. It's a possibility. It's just not realistic. So drilling a hole in a hyoid is not realistic. An arrow is not realistic. I believe personally that Shannon was murdered. I'll stand by that. I believe that there were people, like you said, on Oak Beach that contributed to her death. And you know, we hope that that information continues to be investigated and looked into in a fresh set of eyes, because justice for Shannon needs to happen.
Yes, I agree. And you know, I applaud John Ray for bringing attention to Shannon's case. And I applaud Shannon for, unfortunately, she died, but you know, her disappearance is what really opened up this whole case. And, you know, obviously, I'm not sure necessarily that the other bodies would have been found as quickly after her disappearance had she not disappeared. But, you know, I am concerned about John Ray trying to make that connection between Rex and
so what's the point of it all?
I know, because
you're looking at a case where you had a strong case against Hackett.
Yes.
He said this, he lied about it, he doubled down on his lie, tripled down on his lie. He was proven false, and now everybody ran for cover. He left Oak Beach. He lives in Fort Myers. He's hiding cover and just waiting, like Rex must have been waiting for the last 3 years for justice to come down on him. And that's me personally saying that. And, you know, I should probably be a little bit more objective, but when it comes to that, I won't be. But
well, you and I agree on certain points. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So like why connect Rex to Shannon? Why connect these affidavits coming to him? Maybe their recollections, and there may be something there, but there's been no proof that Shannon was ever on Long Island. We've had 10 years to figure that out, and it's not from anywhere, not from her family, not from Alex Diaz. So Shannon on Long Island just hasn't been the case.
So
to create this conundrum that incorporates Shannon to Rex, Rex to Burke, Burke to Hackett, Hackett to Brewer, and throw in Gus in all of that, I just don't understand why. And for me, what it does is waters down the strength and the foundation of your case against Hackett. So to me, John Ray, I mean, listen, I got a lot of glares at that symposium, and I get it, but what the fuck?
I know. I had to keep my mouth shut. I was like, I'm looking at you, and I'm like,
your client is Shannon, and the estate of Shannon, the legacy of Shannon, and what are you doing to her fucking legacy right now? And I'm just bewildered by that. And there you go.
I agree. I mean, he's trying to make a connection where not necessarily a connection is needed or warranted, or even, you know, evidence proves that there's a connection there.
Well, why dilute the information? with that supposition. Like I'm not challenging the
Yeah.
pose rather.
Yeah.
The pose and their affidavits. I'm not
Yeah.
challenging any of them. Their recollections are theirs,
Yeah.
and they're victims in their mind, and I want to support that the same way I
Yes.
supported Lisa in the beginning.
Yeah.
But the veracity of their statements leaves a lot to be
I agree.
investigated,
And
questioned.
I really hope this does not hurt, the prosecution's case with regards to Rex. And I know
Can't
the
see
defense
how
is
it
going to
would.
jump all over it because, look at what John Ray's saying, So,
Yeah, but there's not enough there. Like
yeah.
you can say anything, but saying anything is one thing. Proving it or substantiating it, or
Mm,
even giving enough cause for
yeah.
reasonable doubt, it's just not there.
Yeah.
Like
I agree.
3 people out of 4 people that live in that house have their DNA on 4 separate victims, and that's what's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're running out of time here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the affidavits. So we had 5 women claim that they had encounters with Rex Human. And one of those women, the first woman that they had at the symposium in person was Lorraine Paulino. And for those of you that may not know, she had a boyfriend. This was back in 1996, February 14th, 1996. She and her boyfriend were swingers. They had responded to an ad. They had gone to Trapeze, La Trapeze, a big swingers club in Manhattan at the time, and they responded to an ad from Rex Human to, come to a swing party at their house. So take this for what it's worth. So basically, on the night of February 14th, 1996, she and her boyfriend were heading out to Long Island, to Massapequa, to meet with Rex Human and his wife at their house. And along the way, they claimed to have run into a woman who they believed to be Karen Vergata, who they said was homeless and hungry, and brought her up and brought her along to this house. So when they got to the house, the boyfriend went downstairs with Rex Human. Lorraine had stayed upstairs with Asa. I don't recall where Karen was at the time. I know she was in the house, but it's believed that through the affidavit that Lorraine gave from her recollection, that when her boyfriend went downstairs with Rex, that they had sexual relations. Lorraine was going to have sexual relations with Asa, but unfortunately, Asa claimed that she was pregnant at the time, and she didn't feel comfortable because she was pregnant getting involved with Lorraine. You can chime in here, Raul. There was a lot of uncomfortableness, and they left Karen at the house. And it's a crazy story. So you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I have a whole lot of issues with that
Yeah.
affidavit. And again, let me just state that it's not that I'm doubting Lorraine. Her recollections are hers, and I'm sure they're traumatic. I visibly saw how traumatic they were for her.
Yes,
I was literally
emotional.
right next to her. We're right there. So I don't invalidate her emotions in that. I have a couple of issues with it, with the whole timeline and all of that. And I think I can't say yes or no that it's Karen Vergata. A lot of things seem to fit into place post haste instead of in a more proactive way. But again, that would be, I'd be blaming Lorraine in that regard. I believe her emotions were sincere. I saw her crying. I saw her sobbing. I heard her sobbing. And I felt for her. I don't challenge the veracity of any of those affidavits. They all have something based in reality. Clearly, we know because Lorraine's affidavit validated that there was RW, the NYPD officer based out of Prospect Park, who Suffolk County, the task force did investigate or interview a couple of times for some time each time. And we don't know, and we may not ever know who RW is. We don't know the ramifications that or the end results or the ripple effects of those conversations, those interviews. So anything to be said about it is speculative.
Mhm.
We just don't know. If we look at forensically, Karen Vergata, Fire Island Jane Doe, when her legs were found on April
Yes.
20th, they were said to be out there for months. The toenail polish was fresh. They Her legs were in a bag, so it's possible, in April, March and April on the Great South Bay, being how cold it is and the water cold, that there could have been some sort of you know continuity. I don't think that's the right word anyway,
No, well,
but
maybe the cold definitely tends to
preserved to some
preserve
degree.
evidence more
Thank you.
so than the
Yeah,
heat.
so it's entirely possible, and there's no edit. There's nothing more than months as described for a PMI, which is postmortal interval.
Hmm.
And then the only thing we find for Karen is her skull in 2011. So we just don't know. It's a story that fits a lot of the empty spaces,
Hmm.
but I'm not there yet. And again, I'm not challenging her honesty or genuineness
Yeah.
or sorrow, but there's a lot to be investigated, and that's not necessarily our job because we don't have access to more
Yes.
information.
For me personally, listening to their affidavits, yes, it was very emotional. I felt very uncomfortable seeing them up there giving these affidavits. I know they have a story to tell, and I'm not going to, like you, I'm not going to doubt the veracity of their stories. Their stories are their stories, but I felt dirty afterwards, is the only way I could describe it. Like, I felt like they were being victimized all over again at this symposium, standing on stage. I mean, one woman was shaking as she's reading her, reading her affidavit. I could see her shaking visibly, and the emotions. One of the things I wanted to point out with Lorraine's affidavit when she was up on stage, two things that were interesting that came up. She had a conversation with Ava, or so she claims, at the house, and they talked about being a foreigner, and how she Asa told her that she came to this country for a better life, and that she married Rex hoping to have a better life, and that she lived in fear of Rex. So that came out. And also, I believe Lorraine had mentioned about the belts. The belts were very prominent in the house, and that she believes, Lorraine, it's her belief that the belts are used by Rex as a show of force, as a show
She
of
broke away.
domination.
Yeah, she actually broke away from reading the affidavit and went
Yes.
off script. And
Yes.
I don't want to say script in a demonizing way.
Sure, but you got to. How
But when
much
she
weight
went
does
off
that have?
script, I just watched the
Yeah.
lawyers that were fighting her.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
he talked about Rex with a belt fetish and belts and belts and belts. And yeah, clearly, because there were numerous belts used.
Yes, three belts, from what I
But
understand, and yeah.
we've learned that since the bail documents.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not challenging her personally, and I'm not
Yes.
saying that there's anything um in intentionally
Mm.
portrayed or put out there. All I'm saying is that um there needs to be a whole lot more looking into. You get very connect me, and I lose my objectivity, and I know that when it comes to these victims and their names and their families and their faces. And I'm still very much committed to Fire Island Jane Doe as I am to Karen Vergata, because
Mm-hmm.
although same, we spent so many years focusing on Fire Island Jane Doe, and I want justice.
Yes.
And somebody like me that does a map full of missing and unidentified, I'm so committed to the unidentified that when they have their names back, I sort of I struggle a little bit to sort of bring them together, because I'm still Fire Island Jane Doe. I'm still Arvern Jane Doe. I'm still Freeport Jane Doe, but I'm also these victims, and marrying them two together, or bringing them home to one. It it's still special to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not problematic, but it's a process. And I think that's just a residue of what I do.
Yes.
But I think with the I think with the affidavits, um, we should clarify what an affidavit is. It's somebody swearing to a statement, and it's somebody else who's sworn to follow through with the process of validating the identity of somebody who's swearing to something. So John Ray is a notary public, or any notary public is just going to validate that the person saying whatever they're saying is who that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily validating what they're saying.
Exactly.
The responsibility, the accountability of what they're saying lies solely on the person saying it, not on the person validating their identity. So, and I'm going to say it a million times, I'm not challenging Lorraine or any of the other Poe affidavits. What I'm saying is that there's nothing there as far as legally for anybody to support putting out an affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't want to sound passive aggressive, but I can sit there and state that, I can fly with my arms. My name is Raul Montero.
Sure.
Catch whatever the hell you want to fucking call me. I don't care. Many other names.
Yeah.
But I swear to that my statement is true.
Yep.
They don't have to validate the statement. They only have to validate my identity.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
therein is your conundrum.
Yep.
And I leave it to the reader to decipher or validate what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think we have enough information yet.
No,
I'd like to say back about RW before we go further with Lorraine.
Yeah, I mean, there was another person. I'm just going to quickly wrap this up. I mean, we had a woman, Taylor, who was 18 years old at the time. She was working at a club selling shots in Philadelphia, and she had an encounter with Rex Heuermann. She was a cocaine addict, went back to a hotel with him, got scared. And then we have Alice Poe. Alice Poe met Rex Heuermann in 1993 at a party hosted by James Burke. Take it for what it is, at the Budget Inn along Montauk Highway in Patchogue, and a lot of details there, but I can't even get into it. But I mean, it's so outrageous. You could probably read about it. And then, we had today's court appearance. Unfortunately, I know we're running out of time here, so I would love to have you back on again. Maybe we could talk about today's court appearance, a little more detail, maybe on another episode.
Well, today's court appearance was just a hearing, and the next court appearance for Rex is on April 17th.
Yeah. I plan actually on attending that court appearance because I actually am off from work, so I'm going to try and get down to Riverhead and
give me a call.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get together and we can do this tag team.
I think the most important takeaway from today, though, is that prosecutors turned over 3,000 police tips to the defense team through discovery. There's also 2,500 lab reports. I have here written electronic devices, cell phone data, laptop data, Palm Pilot data taken into police custody. Obviously the defense is jumping on this, saying that, hey, there are some leads that you received. Maybe some of these leads lead to a different suspect. So that's really what was the synopsis of today's court appearance.
Yeah, and that's what a defense attorney ought to do. So, I mean, he's got a little traction and he's going to run. John Ray is probably handing him a little bit more traction than he had 2 weeks. So, that's also the question. Like, why are we doing this?
I know. I just hope, there's so much evidence, DNA evidence, electronic evidence against Rex, and I don't feel that can be dismissed.
It could be challenged.
It could be challenged
because that new nuclear DNA in that process is new science, and new science needs precedence.
Yes,
and that's Brown's only real angle in this, because without established precedence, you got issues. Look at Vitroff with the sperm density, like that. It's challenged. It's challenged science, and we have to see what happens with that. But this case will break judicial precedence, no doubt.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for having you for coming on the show today. Thank you for your not only all of your knowledge and your intelligence and following this case from its inception, but also your connection to the victims, because you truly are one of the most compassionate people I know, most empathetic people I know, sympathetic person I know to the victims, and you really are the voice of the victims and their families.
I don't speak for them. I just adore them, and I want to advocate
Yes.
for them. But yes, thank
And
you.
for anyone listening, please check out his website on Facebook, Catch Lisk. Raul has done selflessly created a map of all missing and people in the United States, and the map is just absolutely amazing. I don't know if you want to speak to that for a minute or two, just about.
I've now committed to getting all the unidentified on the map. So I have about 12 states done. I'm finishing Georgia because I'm off the next 2 days. So I'll probably finish Georgia tomorrow, if not on Thursday. And then I'm moving into Florida.
Okay.
But with me, I get pulled in different directions instantly. Like a family member will reach out to me from another state, and then I just become embedded in that. And that's how I got to South Carolina before many other people considered South Carolina. That's how I got to Vegas before other people considered Vegas. And
obviously those all have ties to Rex, and yes.
yeah. And aside from Rex, they're just people that need to be
Yes.
brought home and get their names back. We can have another conversation
Absolutely.
about the map. Is very, very dear to me.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you again, Raul. I appreciate all your time, and thank
My
you.
honor.
Yeah, it's always about the victims here at My True Crime Obsession and putting the victims first. And you have certainly done that as well. So this is Christine Dana checking out, and thank you all for your support. And I will definitely be getting back to you with another episode sometime in the near future. Have a great night, guys. Thank you.
Music licensing reimagined.